All right, y'all. Hope everybody's well. Let's see here. We're going to jump in a little rougher than usual. Try and get some, I want to get one in today. So this is a bit impromptu. Hope everybody's all right with it. Shout out to Blood Crow. What's good? Corey, what's going on? Code Father X, what's happening? Oh, man, good to see you. I appreciate that. I hope what I have to say gives you some food for thought. Noor, what's up? Yeah, that's a dope name. I lost a daughter, but I actually named her Anura, so I think it's probably the feminine aspect of that name. But beautiful name, brother. Passport OG, what's good? Mel, what's happening? Wrench Turner, what's happening with you? Eddie in the house. Let's see. Oh, Play Perry, what's up? Petro, Tommy Strategic, what's happening? Jay, Black Males GRP, what's going on? Yeah, we're just going to do a quick dip in because this was something I wanted to say a few words about. And plus, I had a lot of people asking me. So, I figured let me actually just jump in real quick. Original Man, what's happening? Black Nerds, what's going on? Black Nerd Talks, excuse me. What's happening? Yeah, so we're just going to get a little bit in on this. I know it's late and most people are probably not going to catch this until probably tomorrow as far as the replay gang is concerned, but I appreciate y'all coming through. So we're going to talk a little bit about this subject. I don't have a whole lot of preliminaries. I don't have any today. As a matter of fact, we're just going to talk about this real quick in and out because wanted to kind of get that in. Clutch and Stick, what's happening? Indigo, Hitflix, what's going on? All right, so let me just jump in. 87 watching so far. Like, share, subscribe, join, donate, support the channel. Y'all know the deal. If you will, become a Patreon member and jump in there if you can, so we can continue to bring you this independent black male thought. Y'all know what it is. All right. Okay, so all of this is out of order, but we're gonna jump in on a subject that all y'all have been seeing stuff about, but for the sake of posterity, because when you look back at these things in a few months, sometimes a year, we forget a lot of the details. So for posterity's sake, let me set it up a little bit. This is an article on people.com acknowledging the 12-foot bronze statue of a woman in Times Square challenges who should be rendered immortal. Right? Challenges people's internal landscape, said British artist Thomas J. Price. Right? See a bit of the image there. Just grounded in the stars. Will be on view in Times Square until June 17th. So it's a temporary kind of deal. Some need to knows. Let's see. Thomas J. Price is garnering attention for his latest art installation in New York City's Times Square. The 12-foot bronze statue of a young woman in everyday clothes stands with confidence, a nod to Michelangelo's David. British artist said he wants to bind intimate emotional states that allow for deeper reflection around the human condition and greater cultural diversity. So this is what we're looking at. What's up, Dead Set? Hope you're well. Ray, what's going on? Sweet Jones, what's up? Jimmy, what's happening? Now, so this is what is being proposed, right? So New York City, Times Square. Woman stands with ease and confidence amidst throngs of tourists. She just happens to be 12 feet tall. The bronze statue, entitled Grounded in the Stars, is one of two art installations by British artist Thomas J. Price, whose work is challenging people's assumptions about identity and representation, creating a moment for reflection in the frenetic, body-filled public space. The young woman, dressed in contemporary clothes, but posed like Michelangelo's David, has caught the attention of the art world and passerbys alike. The intention of my public work is to become part of the place they inhabit and its physical material history, as well as the visitors that pass through and around the location, no matter how fleeting. Price said in a statement posted on Times Square's website. Grounded in the Stars will be on view until Tuesday, June 17th at the intersection of Broadway Avenue and 46th. Right? The artist did not immediately respond to people's request for comment. Right? Let's see. through scale, materiality, and posture grounded in the stars, disrupts traditional ideas around what defines a triumphant figure, reads the installation description, and challenges who should be rendered immortal through monumentalization. Price's other work, Man series, involves stop motion animation of the heads of sculpted male figures that appear on 95 screens in the square every night from 11:57 p.m. to midnight through the month of May. It's the latest iteration of Times Square's revered Midnight Moment program, which has featured artists such as Andy Warhol and Yoko Ono. So I guess that's the image there. Man series. Right? So this is interesting. So when you talk about immortalization, monumentalization, right? She's going to be there until July. And for men, the accompanying presentation, I guess, this will be on display for 3 minutes, if I understood that properly, on 95 screens in the square, Times Square, for 3 minutes, 11:57 p.m. to midnight, every night till May. So fleeting daily presence for a shorter period of time altogether. There you go. Yep. So this is what we're looking at. And there we go. So that is Price. Thomas J. Price. Let me see. So he's out of Britain. Yeah, there he goes. So this is what we're looking at. Shout out to BGS. What's up? I appreciate that support. I don't know. It just, I had a lot of requests and I didn't want to let people down by not saying anything. BGS dropped something earlier today on it. So if you haven't checked it out, make sure you do so. Yeah. So anyway, so that's what we're looking at. So we just had to set that up, right? Let me get this mess off the screen. All right. So now we know at least what that's about. Now, right out the gate, I looked at the image myself. I wasn't impressed, but I do understand that the question is, this is supposed to be an artistic work. And if it gets people thinking, you have this idea that is sufficient and that is desirable, right? That should be what we want. Now, to me, this kind of piece just contributes to a lot of the stuff we've been seeing in media, which is really focused on the lionization of Black women. Lionization of the singular Black woman stands out of context, really. No environment to speak of, no family, no relationships. She is independent. This is a celebration of a very old idea now, at least been popular for about 50 years. And it proposes that this is the Black woman, perennially. Like this is her essence, and she stands in complete isolation from everything else that's produced her. She's completely out of connection with. Right. So this is the kind of idea I see being presented. It's kind of that sacrificial hero kind of figurization going on here. Which to me is really more about white liberalism than anything else. This is how white liberals like to look at Black women. And Black women, support it, applaud it, because at the end of the day, it adores them. It's adoration. As long as, adoration. It's adoration. And as long as there's adoration, Black women are never going to turn it down, even if it means that they, seemingly prosper without any connection to family, without any connection to environment. They're gonna lap it up, right? So they accept it kind of blindly, and there's no nod to anything else, nothing communally, anything else. The closest thing you get is the Man series accompanying project that shows for 3 minutes a day until freaking May, which kind of tells you what Price's kind of perspective is on men. Right now, to my understanding, looking at some of the other kind of materials, Price is a gay brother, and from what I can tell, ideologically, generally speaking, there tends to be more of an alignment with Black feminism along those lines. So the lionization of women is not surprising from that standpoint, and of course the the kind of diminishment of the male presence kind of is tied to that. I'm not particularly a fan of that framework, but that seems to be, popularly speaking, what we see most, right? When it comes to Black women, when it comes to gay brothers, as long as there's this kind of feminist queer banner, ideologically speaking, there is a kind of female superiority arc or feminine or kind of a feminine superiority arc, right? And then there's this diminishment of the male, diminishment of masculinity, diminishment of manhood. Right? That seems to be what we see most. So this is part of the trope that either feminizes Black men or makes them invisible altogether. I'm going to go into a little more depth on some of that in a moment. This is the mainstream's preoccupation with the singular Black woman. She needs to stand in isolation to the degree where Black males don't exist. Right? And because it feeds her ego, there's no way she's going to actually have a problem with it. Now, in my book, I talk about this as a form of what I call refined misandry. Right? It's so smooth going down, you don't even observe that it's misandry. But it is. Generally speaking, these kind of projects are. And even when you see it in relation to the Man series, the amount of time it has to be on display, all of that kind of speaks to the diminishment of manhood. Now, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what kind of tropes are tied to this, what kind of other productions we've seen are kind of tied to this. So this is just one. Shout out to my brother Jelaba, sent me this a few years ago, and you know, it kind of speaks to the same idea. Right now, this is a, I don't know, I guess it's a meme or whatnot. He sent me this probably about 5 years ago. Right? It says, God is looking at her sons, asking, why won't you shine? And I know the image is unclear, but if you can see it, you have this goddess figure, Black woman, stars in her hair and her skin, and in her hand is a small image of a Black man. And she's looking at her son, asking, why won't you shine? In other words, why can't you be more like me? Why can't you prosper and advance like I do? And we're going to get to that toward the end of the broadcast. Because what Black women in many instances don't recognize is that the degree to which their magic works is often a product of policy. And that same policy alienates Black men, diminishes and underdevelops Black men. So instead of looking at the structural reasons why she's advanced and he's pushed back, what you tend to get are questions like this. Why can't you move in the world like I do? You know, you're just not doing it right. I talked about this years ago. I talked under 4 years, actually. I talked about situations where I've explained to sisters I'm in dialogue with about what I've experienced, and their attitudes are, well, you just didn't say the right words. You weren't nice enough. You didn't speak well enough. You didn't say what I would say. And it actually took a couple of occasions where I took women with me or had them on the phone listening in silence. And when we get off, they were shocked at how people they knew treated me, or, you know, salespeople, or, you know, people over the phone, particularly when it came to women. You know, if I got to call utilities or bill collector or something of that nature, they are shocked at the difference in treatment. They don't generally see that. They start from a vantage point of, why don't you move in the world like I do? And it's not a question of whether the world receives you differently. It's just a question of what is faulty in you, Black man, that you can't move like me. Now that's changing. We're going to talk about why in a minute. Nevertheless, here's this is the kind of image that we've been seeing for years now that kind of highlights the difference in how the mainstream interprets Black men and Black women. And Black women have participated in this because they've had a few generations of this kind of subtle advancement, right? That allowed them access. And more importantly, I won't say more importantly, but just as importantly, alongside access, what it's also allowed them is a sense of belonging, a sense of participation. When you have been raised, especially from K through 12, but into society, to believe that you have a place. I'm not saying Black women don't experience racism or whatever, but there's still an idea that starts really in K through 12. Especially, you know, in K through 6, you got about 90% plus female teachers. There's a difference in how Black males are treated and how Black females are treated very early on. And one of the things that gets baked into how Black women are introduced to society is a general idea that they have a place. One of the earliest stages of this I remember experiencing in high school that I didn't have a framework for, and it took me years to understand, was how much faith Black women had in not only going to college, but getting scholarships, I had none. And I didn't understand why, but they had this kind of built-in faith that they belonged, and a built-in faith that something would propel them along. Now, what we came to find later, and most particularly recently, is that a lot of that were school loans, but we'll get to that later too. But the point is, when you're actually given a sense of belonging, you have a bit more faith in the system. Black men don't really have this. We function because we have to. We engage because we have to. We sacrifice because we have to. We take risks because we have to, but we don't do it because we have a built-in faith in the system. We don't do it because we assume that we are welcome and that there is a safety net that will catch us. We have none of that. Black men walk a goddamn tightrope with no expectations of help or support. And if we get it, it's great, but we don't expect it. Matter of fact, a lot of times brothers are surprised when they get it. Nonetheless, that's not generally how a lot of women move. They move with a different attitude. And that's basically because they've been socialized to believe that even though their presence is not as well accepted as white women, of course, it's still welcome. If you look at the Democratic Party, you could see that. Democratic Party has been doubling down on Black women as the face of the party in some respects, because they know Black women vote in the highest numbers. So there's a kind of reciprocity there. They give lip service to Black women's value without any substance. Black women, of course, lap it up and don't acknowledge the absence of their men in that acknowledgement from the party. This is the dynamic we're talking about. And when she talks about why won't you shine, in other words, it's why can't you move and engage society the way I do? And the reason you can't is because it's a fault in your programming, not a difference in how society receives us. Now, this was something Shay Sade put up a little while ago. I want to say yesterday or the day before. And I found it funny because it caught me off guard. And some people even in there, I commented and laughed, and she, and some of the people asked me to comment on this more fully, and I decided to do so. But she contrasted what you can see here, Thomas Price's piece, with the famous statue in Senegal, which idolizes and lionizes the family unit. Now, of course, we know in regard to feminism here in the West, there's been a war against the nuclear family, most particularly in the Black community, which in many ways came to a head with Black Lives Matter on their website. And they talked about the disruption and the diminishing of the nuclear family, which in essence really meant men, because they had no problem with women-led families. They had no problem with multiple women leading families, married women, so on and so forth. The only thing they really meant was diminishing the presence of men in the family in terms of what was regarded as family in and of itself. Now, they've since removed that statement from their website, but we talked about it on this channel and in this space for quite a while before they did. But I found the contrast interesting, and it raised a lot of debate. And of course, you had a lot of people saying, well, it doesn't matter. I think her standing on her own is a statement of power. Okay. But it wasn't the first time I saw this arrangement. And when I saw it before, it kind of spoke to how we see people trying to realign and redefine the Black family. Last time I saw this was this, right? So we got Rihanna with her man and her child. And even down to the body posture with this image, in contrast to the image in the statue in Senegal, highlighted for us was that in one vein, at this time, this was a few years ago, the idea was to lionize Black women as heads of family, even to the degree where their body posture, hers being masculine and leading, his being effeminate, holding the child. And of course, if you call it effeminate, there are all kinds of questions about to what extent you're a misogynist. And this is, in other words, you have to accept this silently or else there's something wrong with you. This was the idea. On the cover of Vogue, the feminization of men needs to be supported. More than supported, celebrated as the new definition of manhood. So if you put this in kind of chronological alignment and contrast to Senegal, the idea you have between these two images is that, one, you need to first celebrate the feminization of men. And then by the time you get to Thomas Price, 2025, New York, the absence. And this is what's considered acceptable. This is what is considered ideal. Why? Because it foregrounds women. And that's all that's important. Even Thomas Price's art project in regard to the Man series highlights how important men are from this ideological standpoint, right? This is the idea. But when I first saw this image in New York, not this one, the Thomas Price statue, the 12-foot woman, what it reminded me of was 2020. Y'all remember these? The image of Rolling Stone's cover and on Time's cover, right? Lionizing black women. Now, obviously, in one of these images, the Rolling Stone one most particularly, you don't see very many men at all, but you do see children, black male children, one particularly at her side, which clearly designates the power dynamic, right? It signifies mother and child. In other words, this is where men can be present in the dynamic. Men are present in the sense that we are under mama. Now, this is acceptable from the same ideological standpoint. This is really the only acceptable male presence is child. And it's acceptable until he reaches adulthood. And then you have absence. So when I first saw the statue in New York, this is actually what I thought of first. An ongoing project to downgrade and make invisible the black male presence. Even in what we saw with Thomas Price's Man series, you have the same idea. 3 minutes a day until May. And it's not necessarily called the Black Man series, just Man series. I only saw the one image. I have no idea what the other images look like yet. But even in how much presentation time you have, you can see there's a diminishment. And again, if you want to be received well in the circles that support these ideas, you have to not only be excited about it, but you have to share it and propose it and challenge anyone that questions it. You know, this is the idea. We saw this in 2020, right? Middle of COVID, protests that were going on. And so we started to see the mainstream investment in the idea of the singular black woman, self-sacrificial, prophetess, leader, heroic figure. Didn't matter how many people died to put her there, to keep her there. Hell, even if we talk about BLM, we look at how many people died. You have that conversation? How many brothers died and nobody said much about it, even after their deaths? But we got the lionization of the black woman, which, of course, she's not going to challenge or question because, you know, it pedestalizes her. It fundamentally pedestalized her. Now, there was something to this that I didn't know. You guys may have been more familiar with it, but I actually wasn't. These two images actually had a petition. Hold on. I wanted to share it because I was completely unfamiliar with it at the time. Right? Now, this was a demand for Time Magazine and Rolling Stone to apologize for the June and July covers. Now, how realistic that is, you know, you take it as you take it. But nonetheless, it almost has 30,000 signatures. Look at that. Almost has 30,000 signatures. And this is actually put forth by somebody named Inumadun Rain. I know I butchered that. My apologies, not intentional. But let's read the issue. So what the issue is, this person says the recent covers of Time and Rolling Stone magazine are extremely problematic for the image of black women and girls. Rolling Stone cover for July shows an unambiguous dark-skinned black woman as the face of the Black Lives Matter movement. The problem with this depiction is that it reinforces the toxic stereotype of the strong, independent black woman. What triggered the protests across the globe was the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, and as such, black men need to be the face of this movement. He also showed her holding the hand of a black boy, which implies that she was raising her son alone. Why is there no depiction of a black man on the cover with her? That's the fundamental question that goes back to the peace in Senegal. Right? Time magazine cover of July is problematic for a similar reason. The cover shows what appears to be a young black woman who's stressed and tired. The image of this young woman suggests the idea that black women, especially dark-skinned black women, as the face of struggle and pain. The drawing also has a sign in her hair saying, "I am a man." This sort of promotion only masculinizes the image of black women. It strips us of our womanhood. Now, okay, so this is apparently a woman writing this. It strips us of our womanhood and reinforces the notion that we can take on the burden of the world. The woman on this cover is far too young to be weary of the world already. Young black girls deserve to be seen as innocent children and not foot soldiers for the community. Most problematic part of these covers is the fact that black men made both of these covers. So we got the Thomas Price thing being mirrored again, right? Because this is celebrated in left circles. Right? Both of the black men in question do not have black women as their wives. So y'all know, for those who've been listening to my show for a while, I talked about this a couple months ago. I called it the split method. And I was talking about, public pro-Black brothers who advocate for the community, brothers like Cornel West. And I like Cornel, so I mean no disrespect. But often what you'll find with some of these cats is when you actually look into their lives, especially if they're over 50, a lot of the time these brothers have been married a few times. The first time, maybe the second, they're with ADOS women. And then after that, you're lucky to see pictures of the women they've been with since. And when you do, you find that they generally come from other communities. Or they may be Black women, but from other countries. Different socialization process, right? None of that is accidental. So I call it the split method because they want to advocate for the community, and they'll do so. Cornel had, a Black vice president he ran with last year for the office, but he's married to an Arab woman. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm just pointing out how often it tends to happen. And I have a blog piece up where I give examples of other brothers that did the same, but publicly, are regarded as pro-Black, just don't actually marry Black women. So it's an interesting thing. And this is being brought up 5 years ago in this piece here. So I find that interesting. All right. Therefore, let's see. They are unfit to be stewards of our image in any way. Yeah. Because we had asked a question of Thomas Price. Is he with a Black woman? These men represent a problematic faction of Black men. They represent the Black men that value other races of women above us and only use Black women as pawns for their cause. We are meant to be labor for the Black community and take bullets at a march according to them. They push the narrative that Black women, especially dark-skinned Black women, are only fit to be their race soldiers. Even more troublesome is that when these men want to represent women that they think are beautiful, they never choose Black women. In the rare instances they choose a Black woman, she's either mixed race or racially ambiguous. Black men, like the artists you choose, only remember we exist when they want something from us. They do not love us or care about our image. Now notice in that, she skipped over gay brothers. And it's an interesting question. When you look at gay brothers that do the work like Thomas Price or do works like Thomas Price, obviously they're not with Black women in terms of intimate relationships, but some would be surprised as to how many that don't deal with Black men either, or who are not in relationships with Black men either. But that's never brought up. You don't do that. She understands who her allies are and who they're not. So she could critique Black men and Black male artists that participate in this, but she's not going to. She's going to keep it strictly to heterosexual Black men. Anyway, Black women deserve to be loved and protected. We are worth more than the pain we take. We are worth more than how much we can struggle. We demand that you stop working with Black male artists in the future that do not truly value us beyond our pain tolerance. They encourage the entire world to view us as men without penises. Right? Black women are not indestructible and we deserve respect. We ask that in the future, be more cognizant of how you represent us and choose better artists for the job. Thank you. Now, I agree with her in the context of this question of being represented as men without penises. Men with penises are made invisible. Boys with penises can occasionally be present because the power dynamic supports that. But women are being presented as men without penises. I completely agree with her assessment in that sense. Now I do want to highlight something else in relation to what she said. Something I ran across very recently. See if I can get it up here. Wow, Facebook wakes up. I posted this not long ago, so it shouldn't be too hard to find, although I do post a lot. So bear with me for a moment. I just saw it. Where did it go? Come on. I didn't plan to show this until just now, but I think it needs to be shown because we have this idea, particularly in the Black community, that colorism only affects Black women. Black men don't talk about it as much, but that is not true. Where'd you go? Damn it, I must have passed it. Yeah, this is what happens when you do lives. Trust your gut and roll with your intuition. sometimes you make little mistakes. All right, let's see if we can find it, because I think it's important. But what she's saying, I do fundamentally agree with that. At the end of the day, she doesn't describe it as an emasculation of men. She describes it as a masculinization of women. But they're fundamentally dealing with similar ideas, right? That basically, Black men can be absent, don't need to be present at all. And even to the extent that they are present, they are not power. They're not empowered. They're weak. They're followers. And that is supposed to be their role, fundamentally speaking. That's what I pick up from this. That is their role. And they need to accept it and be happy about it. And this is something that we do have to question. We have to challenge, because the idea is, when they try to set this up, is that if you challenge it beforehand, there's something wrong with you, and that your politics are not in alignment. Okay? Your politics are problematic. Right? So even the slightest whiff that you oppose this idea is met with this idea that something's wrong with you, that you're inherently a misogynist and therefore shouldn't be taken seriously. What you have to say should be ignored, and so on. So come on, where did they go? Let me see. Did they hide it? Is that what this is? No. Okay. I apologize. Didn't even dawn on me to include this, but I think it's necessary. Just posted it the other day, so I'm trying to see where it went. Come on. This is ridiculous. They might have blocked it. I don't know why though. It's not one of the most offensive things I've posted anytime recently. It's actually quite tame, all considering. Yeah, I think they pulled it down. Damn. But it should be around here. Almost. I'll give up in a second if I don't see it, but really don't want to. Okay. Crap. Yeah. I guess they took it down. That's interesting. Anyway, all right. So it was a brother who was actually telling a story about going to see an older family member, who was a light-skinned older woman in his family, and he was a boy under 10 years old. His parents left him to stay with her for a couple of days or whatnot, and because he was darker skinned, she made him eat outside with the dogs at a family event that his mother wasn't at, apparently. So and he did a fine job telling the story, but it looks like they pulled it down. And I wanted you guys to really see that. Well, I apologize. But anyway, so that said, this whole idea of colorism, they like to act like Black men haven't experienced. But anyway, so when I saw the image, that's what it took me to. It took me to the 2020 era. It took me to the covers of Rolling Stone, Vogue, Time. This idea of the singular Black woman or the leading Black woman, and either there's a boy present or no male presence at all, other than the masculinization of the female presence and the emasculation of the male presence, even when present. He's either made a boy or effeminate, right? Now, the contrast is when you deal with the reality of where Black women and men actually are and what's going on now. Now, I've talked about this in the last couple months, and one of the things that I posed was that since Trump's election, what we've actually seen in regard to the Black Gynarchy is the ejection of Black women from positions of status, a demotion, if you will, a demotion that is taking many different structural forms that we've taken for granted for years, because for most of our lifetime, this is what Black women have had greater access to, more than we have, right? So let's look at some of the main ones. All right, so check this one out. All right, April jobs report. Black women lost 106,000 extra jobs, most among all workers. Now, one of the things that we could always rely on in the Black community is that Black women had greater access to employment. Black men's unemployment rates were always higher than most particularly Black women. So we knew it wasn't just a racial issue. We knew it was also a gendered issue, but gendered not in the ways that we've been traditionally trained to talk about gender. Right? But instead of going through the article, I'm going to actually go through the data that the article refers to. And I think you might, if you haven't already seen it, find it interesting. This is a table. Here we go. Let me put it on the screen. All right, table A2, employment status of the civilian population by race, sex, and age. This is really dealing with April 2024 through April 2025. Though you do have some areas that deal with not being seasonally adjusted and those being seasonally adjusted, but we're going to look at this nonetheless. I think there's an area that looks interesting. So this is right here dealing with the Black or African American community. And we're going to look at men, 20 years and over, unemployment rate. All right. This is that across the board there. This is what we're looking at. So if we go get back and get to the top, the first three columns are April 2024, and then March and April of 2025. And then for seasonally adjusted, and we're going to focus more on that, April 2024, and it skips to December and then goes to April 2025. So we're going to kind of focus more on these last six columns. So for Black males, right, we're going to look at here, we got 5.2, 5.6, 6.9, right? So that is 6.9 is for January of this year, right? February, March, and April. So April goes down to 5.6. So this is for Black males, you know, in regard to unemployment. Right. So matter of fact, we can even just look at the last two, 6.1 and 5.6 for March and April of this year. Let's go to women and look at women's unemployment rate. You can see it right here. Right. So for March, Black men were at 6.1, Black women were at 5.1. In April, Black men are at 5.6. And for the first time, we see Black women shoot past Black men at 6.1. Now, granted, these are dealing with months, so we're going to need to look at this on a longitudinal basis over time and see what the long-term term effects are. But what we can tell is that when it comes to unemployment, at least for this given moment, loss of over 100,000 jobs in a very short period of time has had an impact. Right? So this is the reality. So we got the lionization of Black women happening in terms of media, and this has been going on for the last number of years. The absencing of men and the male presence altogether. But since we've had this conservative push into office, this removal of DEI practices and other things we're going to talk about in a moment, we're seeing this kind of social demotion taking place. Now, I did a show a couple months ago highlighting how many high profile Black women in really high level positions were being publicly removed, being caught doing illegal things. I take that with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of people doing illegal things in high level positions, but who gets caught, who goes to jail is a whole different conversation. It's not necessarily about guilt or innocence. It's about who's even being pointed to in public, who's being identified as somebody doing something problematic or illegal. And in this last few months, we've seen a record number of high profile Black women being called out publicly, right? But now we're seeing it shift into areas of unemployment. Right. So again, this is only dealing with monthly data, but as we go forward, it's going to be interesting to see what happens from there. So that's one thing. Right. We also have this happening in terms of, you know, the removal of particular grants, right? Grants that we've known for years were earmarked for special, demographics, often demographics that didn't include Black males. I was talking to a brother of mine earlier today, and he was telling me in his area, he's an artist. And one of the areas that, one of the things he's known in his artistic community is for the last couple decades that they were often, they would often get grants and start nonprofits and 501c3s and be able to establish themselves along those lines. And he said there was a clear marked line between Black women and Black men in terms of access to these resources. They were overwhelmingly targeted at Black women. Black males, for the most part, couldn't get many of them. You had an occasional brother that could for one reason or another, but for the most part, there was almost a silent gender line over who had access to these resources. And as we know, over the last year, and it's even culminated in a lawsuit, those resources have been put into serious question. And so you have a lot of people in the nonprofit and the artistic community that have found that these grants that they've relied on for decades, in some cases, have disappeared. Right? There's a recent one that many of you have probably run across in the news. We're not going to go through it in depth. I'm not going to be here all night. I just kind of wanted to show you a few things. This one we've seen in the news as well, right? White House proposes the elimination of Section 8 housing vouchers. Now, this is going to hit poor people across the board. And many of these, more than the Black community, are going to hit white women. So part of what we're seeing is kind of a family war between conservative and liberal whites. Because a lot of these, especially when we talk about DEI, it's a lot of it, the majority of it is hitting white women. Trump is not oblivious to this. Much as we like to present these ideas like we're the primary target, not really. If we were the target, it wouldn't take much to target us more specifically. But a lot of the programs or a lot of things that the current president is doing is overwhelmingly affecting liberal women. White women most particularly. Nevertheless, this is going to also hit Black women, mainly because Black men have not enjoyed any serious access to welfare, including Section 8, for generations. Yeah. This is what we're looking at. White House eliminating Section 8 housing. So we're going to see what happens with this over time. But I'm just pointing out the reality. So even though we have the lionization of Black women in a statute, we have the elimination of the structural means by which they've been able to step past Black men with greater ease. And sometimes we'll turn around and dismiss Black men who are not able to keep up pace with them, even though they've enjoyed access to resources that they know Black men couldn't get. Now, many Black men, especially employed Black men, still earn more than Black women, but of course that's not celebrated, it's not acknowledged, it's just kind of dismissed altogether. And many Black men don't even know they earn more. But they lack support. And all of this kind of for me culminates in a study that I ran across. I think you guys might find interesting. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to bring up on the screen, but I wanted you to see it. There we go. Yep, there we go. All right. So I'm going to put the link after the show for everything I've shown you in the description box, and you can access it yourself. But this one, and you can download this for free, or at least it allowed me to. I didn't sign into anything university related, so I'm assuming you should be able to get access to this paper as well. But I do have to throw out the caveat that maybe I got access in some way I'm not familiar with, but I don't think so. Either way, it's called Unheard Voices, the Importance of Intersectionality and Responsiveness and the Systemic Ignoring of Black Men by Elected Officials. This was published April of this year, right? So this is brand new data. Written by Ethan C. Busby, Andrew Thompson, Tomo Verbuchen, Susie Yee, and I probably butchered those names, but this is important. Check this out. Now, we've always been told when it comes to representation that greater representation somehow translates to power, somehow translates to being heard more and being able to have your will addressed. But this study suggests something I think we need to take into account. So I'll start at the top. All citizens are not listened to equally, despite the importance of responsiveness and listening to different theories of democracy. We take an intersectional approach to make several novel predictions about how citizens' identities, the topic of constituent messages, and the identities of elected officials combine to influence responsiveness. Here's where it gets interesting. These theories lead us to expect and empirically confirm that Black men in particular, more than other racial and gender groups, are systemically ignored by elected officials. So in other words, when we talk about representation in media, The subtext to that conversation has always been power. Power meaning that your presence in media, right, keeps you in mind as far as the public is concerned and somehow translates to your will being able to affect policy simply because your presence is acknowledged. Music, TV, film, internet, you name it. This study shows something else. We implement a wide-scale experiment with U.S. local elected officials, about 23,738, to test our predictions. Extending previous work, we vary the race, gender, and topic of the constituents' message, and we observe if elected officials both open and reply to constituent messages. We find that Black men are systemically ignored, regardless of the message they send. In contrast, elected officials respond less to Black women when they discuss race, less to white women when they discuss gender. We discuss the implications of this study for work on responsiveness in democratic government. So, what I'm saying here is that even though this fight for media representation has always kind of been a cover for a fight for power, representative power, especially as in regard to policy, what we find is no matter what Black men's presence is or isn't, that for the most part, we're the most ignored demographic as far as politics are concerned, as far as political representatives are concerned. And in a way, that study reinforces what the image in New York highlights: the absence of Black men, the absence of presence in Black men. Now, again, we're questioning this relationship between media representation and power. But at least for Black men, as it kind of seems, our absence can be felt on multiple levels. And that's essentially what I see when I look at this image. This image that we are all going back and forth about what it means, how we should receive it, how we should interpret it. The way I look at it is that it is part of a trope, part of a tradition of Black feminist media that proposes the lionization of Black women, that relies fundamentally on white liberal subsidization, because white liberals love this as much as Black women do, at least in terms of what they say is regarding aesthetics publicly and what they're willing to fund, right? We got the lionization of Black women. We got the appeal to the white liberal dollar, white liberal interest, and we have the absence of Black men. Unless we are young males, which is the only way we're acceptable, alongside maybe an LGBT presence, but that's harder to nail in a statute, at least without going too far as stereotypes go. So when people ask me, what do you see when you see this? I see an ongoing agenda to downplay and eliminate and make invisible Black men. And I see it being reinforced in terms of empirical data in regard to our access to power. Playing by these rules doesn't work. We have to play by a whole different set of rules. Hence why we have the Black male political agenda. Hence why so many Black men have been pushing for the last few years to experiment with alternative ways to address politics. It's mainly because we've been ignored by both parties for years. Democrats primarily ignore us while they enjoy that we are the second highest voting demographic for them. The conservatives don't even have to make promises to us. At the end of the day, neither party acknowledges us in any serious way. But one party does participate in the lionization of women, and those women lap it up. And why wouldn't you? You're being pedestalized, you're experiencing a level of adoration that doesn't generally happen often. And the only thing you have to do to receive this is contribute to ignoring men. Something that, as a Black feminist, you don't have a problem with anyway. So while we're seeing this lionization take place, the other thing that I noticed happening, especially in regard to the unemployment rate, was Black women are starting to experience life as Black men. No safety nets, no grant research, no welfare benefits. And if anything, because of years of putting Black men down for not going to college to the same degree that they are now, Trump pushing for a return to student loan payments to the degree where you might be garnished as of May 5th Black women are starting to experience life much the way Black men have, with no expectation of a safety net. And this is something that you're struggling with. But it's just started. So, we got a long way to go to see where this goes and to what extent. But at the end of the day, these are the things that I thought about when I saw this image. And so I thought it fair that since some of the subscribers asked that I comment, those are the things that I see. These are the things that I think people have no problem with. They take for granted. This comes out of nowhere. Not only is this bolstered by policy, this is mainly a white liberal fascination. And it's really a fetishization of the Black female image, right? This idea of the warrior woman, right? Much the way the woman who raised the petition against the Rolling Stone and Time magazine covers in 2020. Even though she had more of a feminist bent to her approach, I still fundamentally agree with her depiction. I just come at it from a different angle. But the way she put it is sound, right? She's looking at women without men, without family, without community, being masculinized and given penises. And this is what the white liberal fascination with Black women points to, right? It points to a masculine woman. It points to a male female. This is the preoccupation of the left with Black women. And Black women accept it to the degree that it's supposed to designate and translate into some kind of access to power. That's really what it is. Although they love the pedestalization, don't get me wrong, but it's also supposed to translate to some degree of power, and it has to some extent. The things that are being taken away now were things that were given in the first place. These were things that Black women were coerced, seduced to participate in, going as far back as, well, we can take it back earlier, but let's start with the late 1960s. The rise and mainstreaming of feminism, right? They courted Black women and offered them baubles. They offered them gifts. They offered them access via white women, via white liberal women most particularly, access to resources that Black men couldn't get. And the cost of that access was stepping away from Black men. And if anything, mirroring how white women were talking about white men. Now, that was a family squabble between white women and white men. And really what it came down to is white women just wanted a bigger cut. That's really all it was. But when white folks catch a cold, we catch the goddamn flu. So in as much as that family spat between white women and white men is still going on to this day, Trump just gave the latest blow to liberal white women in terms of these policies he's pushing. That family spat about who gets a greater cut of the pie, who's in a position of authority to demand what. We took it on as a goddamn war. And Black women shot across the bow first because the agreement they made with white feminists in particular is you can have access to these resources as long as you cut them niggas out. Cut them out of families and then turn around and call them deadbeat dads. Right. So the narrative we've had for the last few decades as to what the state of the Black family is because deadbeat dads or, just leave. But we ignore the fact that they actually have access to resources via family court and even the police departments to push men out. That never gets discussed because another aspect of what they benefit from is media based. The narrative of what's happened in the Black community, Black women have had greater access to as far as what is the mainstream considers the problem with the Black family. When you get Steven Spielberg directed movies going as far back as 40 years ago that get to highlight what the story is, the primary narrative of the Black family. When you get Steven Spielberg directed films, internationally distributed, you get to set the narrative, right? So there's a number of things that operate on their behalf that all came with what I call the Faustian bargain, right? Between Black women and white feminism. And this is what they took to. The 80s, via especially people like Oprah, was just the popularization of the bargain. But the bargain was struck in the late 60s at the very latest. And they took off with it. It's only now that they seem to be ejected from these positions that they were sold into, or they sold themselves into. They signed a bargain for. And the cost of that bargain was to not need us. And this is what's been happening. So what we're seeing now are the death throes of this kind of patronizing of this black woman image, this black female image, masculinization of the black female image. It's in its death throes, in my humble opinion. Right? Unless you're going to get a Democratic Party that's going to reinstitute the policies they've been pushing for the last 20, 30 years, which I highly doubt, we're looking at the death of the gynarchy. We're looking at the death of the Faustian bargain. We're looking at the death of the independent black woman idea. An idea, the singular independent black woman idea that is predicated on the absence and underdevelopment of black men. That's what you get. Now people say, well, that's a lot to read in a statue. It's just a statue honoring her. Well, there's a lot of ways to do a statue. There's a lot of ways. And shout out to Shay Sade. You could have gone with Senegal or a variation of such, but you didn't. Because the idea that people want to still celebrate is this dying idea that black women can do it without black men. And what they're discovering, and we're all seeing live and in color in social media, are more and more women who are starting to figure out that they actually need men. Because as soon as Trump was elected, this is something I've been saying for months now, every other group of women went back to their men. They were talking big shit. Michelle Obama was up there telling people to vote against their family's interests, lie to their husbands about who they vote for, get a woman in office so we can get abortion back. They were talking all of that mess. They showed their face. And as soon as the election went right, not left, went right to Trump, every other group of women went home to their men. Some black women doubled down on not meeting men. Other black women started putting forth apology videos. Quick. Now, well, I'll say the first week we know they were throwing tantrums and whatnot in cars, flipping out. But after that, they started doing apology videos. More and more, I'm seeing women putting out content talking about the need for men, the need for family. There's still no apology. There's still what BGS calls a redress of grievances. There's still no acknowledgement of what men have been saying. But at the same time, there's this growing acknowledgement that we need to come back together again. Well, I don't know how possible that is, especially when you look at what the younger generations of men are doing. But that said, it definitely isn't going to happen without an acknowledgement of the last 50 years. And there's been none. The gaslighting that's going on, right? Because even when you look at the concept of black girl magic, it doesn't acknowledge policy. It doesn't acknowledge access. It doesn't acknowledge what black women were able to benefit from that black men weren't. It acknowledges none of that. It's just magical because it just fell out of the sky and they fell on them because they were so magical. And that yeah, this is what we're looking at. The singular, lionized, adored, fetishized, independent black woman, loved by the left. That idea of her is dying. And yet on the ground, reconciliation with black men, they're starting to push for it without having to acknowledge fault, without having to acknowledge past actions. The only fault that can be acknowledged are black men. We got to be the ones that are responsible. We're the deadbeat dads. We chase white women too much. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of faults that black men have been accused of for the last few decades. But collectively, or in significant numbers, we've not seen black women acknowledge not only what they've done, not the Faustian bargain or anything since. They've not acknowledged that, nor have they acknowledged the gaslighting that they participated in by telling black men that the piss that's on our heads is rain. That's basically what they've been telling us. That the resources they had access to were just a product of their brilliance. And the fact that black men had no access was just because we were lazy. I mean, these are the same kind of stereotypical concepts that we heard from racist white folk. And Tommy Curry already showed how black feminists use much of that same research to articulate their works in regard to how they positioned and framed black men. They actually used white racist scholarship to do so. We're seeing the same thing in the public discourse, where for years, we were monsters, abusers, rapists, deadbeat dads. And instead of acknowledging and apologizing for that gaslighting. Instead, what we get is, well, it's just time for the Black family to come together. Word. That's how you approach that. Doesn't work that way. So anyway, that said, just to cut to the quick. You ask me what I see when I see this image. I see a dying idea. An idea that's been propped up by policy for decades, and that policy has now begun to turn against them. Those safety nets have been removed. I'm not jumping in the aisles, but I'm not walking the hallways crying either. I and many Black men like me are desensitized to much of this. It is what it is. It is what it is. But yeah, that idea is dying. And at the end of the day, they're still contributing to the elimination of Black men or the Black male presence. And they're content with that. And they're fighting to maintain the idea. Keep doing it. By all means, keep doing it. You have no idea what's coming, what's already been set into motion. Just watching the younger generations, I'm like, y'all are not going to like this next couple decades. Really not. Black community is going to change in tone and presence in a lot of ways. And it's already in motion. Before Passport Bros became a mainstream thing, already in motion. And this kind of shit contributes to it. But what is being presented as a harmless, artistic statue is far more than that on both sides. Right? For feminists, it's always about political power and access. But in terms of, how those of us in the other sphere kind of look at that, you're promoting a dead idea that has grown and built itself off the absence and exploitation of Black men. And Black men aren't standing for it anymore. And you can call us whatever you want to in public, but we have our own circles to reinforce what we study, what we come to, and what conclusions we reach. It's not dependent on mainstream approval. That's one of the things I got to say about both the Black manosphere and Black male studies. It's reached, launch capacity, right? Breaking out of the atmosphere. It's long since been doing that, whether people like it or not. And they're still denigrating it in the mainstream, but men are developing their own circles, their own dialogues, and no longer wait for other people to approve and pat them on the head. And so they keep coming out with mainstream projects that denigrate, men who choose to go another way, so to speak. Not directly referring to MGTOW, but still. They keep trying to do it, but it's not working. So, let me see. Shout out to Dead Set. Says, I redefine the Black family as a family with a Black male at its head, regardless of the race of the wife. And that's what I mean when I say the Black community is changing in tone and presence. It's irrevocable at this point. Let me see. Shout out to Lord of Brooklyn, BK for life. Became a YouTube member. Appreciate that. Welcome to the Onyx Brotherhood. Shout out to Original Man for that donation. Appreciate that. Says, absolutely. They are so tone deaf to the differences. It's easier for them to just say it's our fault. The men in my family have taken longer to develop, and I had to explain this to my sister. Yeah, it's a different relationship. Shout out to Calvin. Just salute, Doc. What's your thoughts on the Diddy trial? Do you think the case is bigger than Diddy? Oh, definitely. I think it goes to a string of similar cases that we've seen going back. Black men are the face of what they consider sexual depravity. And so as long as they can kind of publicize that and keep the public's attention on that, you have others that don't even get to be put under the microscope in the same kind of way. We are a distraction. I'm not losing any sleep for Puff as an individual person or P. Diddy. Yes, that's technically showing my age and calling him Puff. But at the end of the day, it's not about him individually that I'm talking about. I'm just noticing the play. But I haven't delved into that, so I won't go into any great detail, because I want to actually get my ducks in a row if I ever do. But at the end of the day, the assault on Black men has never stopped. It continues in regard to our public image. These people are investing in ideas that have been dying for a while now, and they're continuing to. I lose no sleep about it. But this statue is just one in the ongoing, stream of forms of representation that alienate and invisibilize Black men. And Black men are not having it. I'm hearing more Black men outspoken about this than 10 years ago, it was like pulling teeth to get 5 brothers to speak publicly about something like this. Now I'm seeing brothers coming from all walks of life jumping in on this discussion. Some making good arguments, some of them not so good. Doesn't matter. They're more outspoken than I've ever seen. And that to me is a victory in unto itself. Because I didn't think I'd see a day where Black men would be this outspoken. And I'm glad to see it. Lord of Brooklyn says, where is the racial prerequisite in terms of marriage and dating for Black women's participation in advocacy and representation of the community? Where is the racial prerequisite? Can't say. I don't know if there actually is one. I mean, brothers are going all over the world. Contrary to popular opinion, Black men are not necessarily, because the idea, when you listen to Black men talk about traveling the world looking for everything from sex to marriage, they're going everywhere. Brazil, the Caribbean, they're going to the DR, they're going to, Thailand, they're going to the Philippines, they're going to Africa, right? But if you leave it to Black feminists to frame for you what Black men are doing, they just want white women, which has been the ongoing kind of critique of Black male sexual interest for the last, going back to slavery. The idea is that Black men just want white women. But you really don't hear about Black men going to European countries in any large numbers looking for women. They're going everywhere else in the world. And most of which, they tend to still entertain Black women. They just tend to be Black women from different countries. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but as far as I can see, it seems to me like the majority of Black men still want women that mirror them in some kind of way, contrary to popular opinion in the mainstream or amongst Black women. But they are leaving spaces where they are routinely disrespected and downplayed. And these kinds of projects, like the artwork in New York, support the very idea of Black male diminishment, the absence of presence, even in the artistic work that Price did on the Man series, right, which is accompanying this piece we're looking at. So anyway, I look forward to hearing your comments. I look forward to reading about what you think and what else needs to be made part of this discussion. I know there's been a lot of talk back and forth. I just wanted to drop my 2 cents in. I'm curious to see what y'all do with it, what you think. And I appreciate you guys popping through. Make sure you hit the like button, if you will, so that others can actually, be able to kind of check this out. Rhythm is working for me, and that's aside from the fact that I'm already shadow banned, that's not helping. And I did that to myself. I've just been preoccupied. This is actually finals week, so I am grading at this point day and night, and I'm already pretty exhausted. But my son is coming home later this week, so I look forward to seeing him. He's completing his sophomore year of college. We'll be starting back up in the fall as a junior. Looks like he's going to finish strong this semester. So he had some courses that he really liked. So I'm really happy for him. And I'll be excited to see him and hang out with him and find out what's been going on. I kind of stay a bit hands off. I think I call maybe twice a month at most, just to give him his space. But I miss him. So looking forward to it. But y'all have a good one. And I will holler at y'all later. And I'll take it light. All right. Peace.